This week on the agenda, the migrant crisis. As measures are toughened and the far right rises, is it time for Europe to reconsider its approach to asylum seekers? There are many reasons why people cannot stay in their own countries, including war, hunger, and extreme poverty. Some believe they have a better chance of finding work and access to education elsewhere. But European countries are struggling with how to balance stronger border enforcement with concerns over human rights and migrant safety. The number of arrivals in Europe peaked in 2015 when more than 1 million people crossed its borders, the majority fleeing the conflict in Syria. But asylum applications are still rising and migration has become a hot election issue across the continent. More than 116,000 people have arrived into Europe via sea since the beginning of this year, mostly into Italy, Spain and Greece. But some 41,000 of those then attempted to reach the UK from the Schengen zone. Dozens have drowned trying to cross the English Channel this year in small boats. Germany and France have called for an EU-wide deal with the UK to tackle the numbers of people illegally trying to reach their shores. But Germany has also expanded its border controls to curb irregular migration. So what are the humanitarian and policy challenges in dealing with the highest global number of refugees and displaced people since the Second World War? Joining me now are Camille le Coz, Associate Director at the Migration Policy Institute, and Ariadna Ripoll Servent, Professor of Politics at Salzburg University. Thank you both for coming on the agenda. Camille, let me start with you. Why are we seeing such an influx of people trying to reach European countries right now? What are they running from? And what are they hoping to find?
Some people flee persecution in their countries, others seek better economic opportunities, and many also aim to reunite with family members. What we've seen in recent years is, a lot of the people who are fleeing violence initially seek protection in the neighboring countries, but challenging condition in the same country may make it difficult for them to remain and then prompt them to continue their journey in search of better opportunities, of better options. And what we've seen, if you look at the main nationalities of asylum applicants in Europe, Syrians, Afghans, and Turks consistently rank among the top 3. And here it's clear the dire condition in Syria, the persecution in Afghanistan are key driver for this movement.
And Ariadna, anti-immigration rhetoric really fueled political discourse this summer, with far-right parties encouraging that, showing gains in the polls in France, in Germany, in Austria, to name but a few. What made immigration that top election concern? And again, why now in particular?
I think that the first thing that we should remember is that this is nothing new, right? So anti-immigration discourses have been there already in the 1980s, 1990s. It's very much linked to the rise of anti-immigration parties in France and Germany, the Netherlands, and many other countries. I think what is surprising now at the moment is that actually we do not have really a migration crisis compared to the numbers we had in 2015, 2016. Of course, we saw a peak, especially with the Ukrainian or the war in Ukraine. But at the moment, we do not really see the same numbers. And this shows very well that all these nativist parties, populist parties, are very good at mobilizing the issue of migration, and presenting themselves as experts and saying, well, we have a problem and we are the solution. And so they are very good at actually perpetuating this sense of crisis.
Camille, I wonder what you think, because as Ariadna says, the last major immigration crisis was in 2015, when more than 1 million people arrived without permission in the EU. So how is 2024 different?
So what we're seeing is well, since the beginning of the year, EU member states, Switzerland and Norway have received about 500,000 asylum claim, which is stable compared to last year and really the highest since 2015 and 2016. But really, what is different compared to this time is that asylum system have strengthened. They were really stammering in 2015. That's, you know, less the case now. The EU has also stepped up its operational capacity with, for example, the EU Agency for Asylum. There's been more efforts to work with countries of transit, countries of origin, all of this contributing, you know, to a stronger, a more coordinating response at EU level. And while at the same time, as Professor Ripoll Servent pointed out, the issue of migration is more politicized than it was in 2015. And in certain part of Europe, it's become increasingly difficult to have a conversation about policy options, different trade-off based on facts, based on figures. And a lot of it has to do with misrepresentation of these trends and, you know, what migrants really are.
But efforts have been made and strides have been taken, Ariadna. I think it's interesting, though, that a string of countries that had been instrumental in getting the reform package due to come into force in 2026 over the line, those countries have now announced a hardening of their individual national asylum policies. You know, how do you think the far right is changing EU asylum policy?
So again, this is nothing new, right? So there's been a hardening of asylum law probably already since the 1990s, if you look at what Germany, like the laws that Germany introduced in the 1990s, but also especially since the early 2000s. But it's true, what is true is that it has often come as a response to these nativist parties, to these anti-immigrant parties. So often what we've seen is that we have nativist parties, both from the left and the right, speaking against migration, and then mainstream parties reacting to that and hardening asylum laws, making them more restrictive. And the example of Germany now this summer is very good, right? So that we have new wins, so new victories in regional elections, and the immediate response is basically to say, well, then we are going to make it more difficult for asylum seekers to stay here or to get some benefits. There is also a bit of a ratchet effect, right? That one country makes it harder for asylum seekers, and then the next one makes it harder again, and so on and so forth.
But yet, as you mentioned, Germany has cracked down on its border controls. And Camille, I wonder what you think about that, because they've recently expanded those, and some critics have said that move is a reflection of a dangerous populism in the debate over migration politics. What's your take?
Yeah, this measure were really meant to send a message, I will say, both to German citizens, but also to other EU member states. For the German public, this was intended to show that the government is doing something on migration, is trying to better manage migration. And in a way, the advantage of this border check create the impression, the visuals, that you have, guards inspecting vehicles at the border, while we know in reality these checks are unlikely to have much impact. Yeah. And what Germany should do, among other things, is focus on less visible but more effective solution, improving cooperation with its neighbors in this regard. And that leads me to the second messaging the second message that I think Germany is trying to send its neighbor, which is that enough is enough. Since 2015, Germany has really shouldered a significant proportion of refugee and asylum seekers influxing into Europe, with the Syrian crisis, with the Ukrainian crisis. Just in the first semester of 2014, over a quarter of all asylum applications in the EU were lodged in Germany. And there is a sense that Germany is standing alone in making efforts in terms of hosting refugees.
Camille, I want to turn now to the UK, because Germany and France have said that Brexit really gravely affected coherence of politics on asylum and on immigration, and that what they're pushing for is talks Europe-wide to have a deal with the UK. Can you really see that happening?
I think what we've seen this weekend, once again, I highlighted the tragic reality of what's happening at the Channel, with more people losing their life trying to cross to the UK. And for the first time in a long time, I would say, there is a political opening with, on the one hand, a Labour government, and on the other end, the new pact at EU level has been adopted. This was really all what EU member states, EU government were focusing on in the past years. So there is a little bit of political space to move forward with the UK-EU deal on migration. Having said that, the challenge really lies in changing the current approach. Over the past decade, we've seen that this purely security approach strategy in northern France is failing. We're seeing smuggling network, becoming increasingly elaborate, sophisticated criminal networks, people, migrants trying to cross, from other places, further south from the coastline, people losing life at an increasingly space. I think what we've seen in the past few months in northern France is, has really taken a toll. And so this situation calls for other policy measures, including the introduction of safe pathways.
I wonder, taking all of this in and thinking about the things that both of you have just said, do you think that Europe is maybe too wrapped up in the negatives of immigration and doesn't look at the potential benefits?
Indeed, right? So I think that is now becoming extremely obvious, right? And it comes back to this idea of creating legal pathways of migration. First, to make coming to the Europe safe, right, and saving lives. In a way, this idea that we can have a fortress Europe, this we've seen over the years that this is not realistic, that, if there's a will, there's a way. And so it just becomes more dangerous to cross the borders. But also, I think that what we have to face is the reality that demographic change is coming, that there are labor shortages. We have labor shortages in key economic sectors, construction, nursing, hospitals, schools, and so on and so forth. And that we need actually migration, that we are not going to manage with the birth rates that we have at the moment. So I think there is really a need to change the message and to say, first, we need legal pathways of migration for people who want to come here and work, which in a way, it's probably the majority of the people who want to come. And second, also for the people who are already here, giving really enough resources for these people to integrate.
But, I wonder, Camille, is this a uniquely European problem? I mean, are there lessons to be learned maybe from other regions in the world where there's maybe a different approach?
There is much to learn, for example, from a series of measures that have been introduced by the Biden administration. And of course, the systems are different. The US is facing an immense backlog in its asylum system. They failed over and over to pass comprehensive immigration reform. But the Biden administration, I still come up with, I would say, two innovative tools. One has been legal status for 4 nationalities, Cuban, Asian, Venezuelan, and Nicaraguans, who were, among the top nationalities arriving at the border. And against, if they fulfill certain conditions, they need to have a sponsor in the US, they need to, go through a security process. If they match this condition, they can be granted authorization to travel to the US safely. And this, has changed some of the dynamics, some of the routes associated with these people who previously would come to the US-Mexico border, and contributing to the situation there, really marked by a lot of insecurity and difficult also situation for the host communities, for the people living at these borders.
But, there's little doubt that government crackdowns across Europe are leading desperate people to take increasingly desperate measures to reach certain countries. Ariadna, what policies need to be in place to prevent that and curtail the number of deaths in European waters?
I mean, a solution, of course, could be more information, but then again, it's the same. It's again the same answer, right? So if you make it difficult for people to come through legal pathways, or for instance, we have actually now the possibility to resettle people, right? So we have a new resettlement regulation, which could be activated and could be made use of. But we already saw it when we had these kind of temporary programs for resettlement that member states didn't make use of them, right? So, and that is, for instance, a safe way to bring people from areas affected by conflicts directly to Europe without having to cross the Mediterranean. I mean, of course, some could say like the solution is to, for instance, have all these deals with North African countries, like we have with Egypt, with Tunisia, and so on and so forth. The problem with that is that many of these countries do not have a national asylum system. And also that we've seen it again and again, that there are repeated problems with human rights. And so this is not really the solution. The solution is to rethink migration and to stop also criminalizing, for instance, search and rescue and people helping migrants in the Mediterranean, and to find new legal ways so that people can come here.
Ariadna Ripoll Servent, Camille le Coz, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Stay with us. As still to come here on the agenda, we take a look at how one Mediterranean country is coping with the migrant crisis.
We are all connected. Across borders, across continents, connected by ideas, a shared humanity. Stay connected.
Welcome back to the agenda. Since 2015, Greece has been a key entry point to the EU for migrants and refugees, with nearly 1 million arrivals that sparked an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. Well, joining me now to discuss the country's current approach is Manos Logothetis, Greece's Secretary General for Migration Policy. Thank you very much for coming on the programme. Now, look, as we've said, Greece is one of those first stops for many migrants coming to Europe, especially those from places like Syria. How are you coping with that influx?
Juliet, I think that you're right in the first statement. I mean, Greece is the first stop coming from the Mediterranean route, or the Aegean route, or I don't know how it might be called. But definitely it's not only about Syrians. In the last 10 years, we had like most probably most of the nationalities that you can come up with. So it's not only about Syrians. Yes, back in 2015, for the reasons that everyone can easily understand, it was mostly Syrians. But after that, we had a lot of other groups that from time to time actually made their way through Greece to Europe.
And so what changes have you seen in the type and in the numbers of migrants arriving in Greece over the past few years?
Listen, back in 2016, there is this thing called the Common EU Statement with Turkey. And after that, it was the period that the influxes went down. And then they escalated gradually. And then we had the big thing in Evros of Greece. You remember that period when thousands of people tried to enter our land borders through Turkey. Yeah. And then again, the influx went down. And afterwards, we had like something like 20,000 because of COVID. It was the COVID era. And after COVID, they gradually escalated up to 40,000, 45,000, even 50,000 a year that arrive in Greece and ask for asylum. Currently, for the last 2 years, we are standing at that number, so 50,000 arriving a year, and we have to tackle them. In the meantime, we actually created a new system of reception and identification of the people, so we could actually tackle the numbers that we got, meaning that we increased the speed and the capacity, or the capacity and the speed of our asylum system and our registration system. And actually we can handle, let's say, these 40,000 a year, 40,000 a year.
So these are big numbers you're talking about, and I appreciate that you're putting in these measures in place to manage it, to handle it. But earlier this year, the European Court of Human Rights criticised Greece for its approach to refugees and asylum seekers, even going so far as to say that the treatment of some was inhumane. What's your response to that?
You know that Greece is the acropolis of migration, so this whole thing back in 2015 started here, so we have a lot of criticism since then. Most probably this led its way to a court, and after all these years, this finds itself to the court, and we had this criticism, let's say, but we are used to that. I mean, I would invite anyone who makes this criticism to come and see what was the case back in the past and what is the case currently. And with that, we can avoid all the criticism. Of course, for the past, we have seen images. Things were not that well, but we tried really hard. And with the support of the European Commission, we managed to create a new system of reception that is most up to the standards of being at least a humane reception. I'm saying that because I was working back in 2015 in a camp, what was built to host something like 600 people. And at the time that I was there, we were hosting something like 9,000. So, and that was on an island of Greece. Currently, we do not have even one camp that the capacity to occupancy ratio is more than 100. So less people are hosted in each and every camp than they were supposed to. So in that sense, I would proudly say that we listen to the criticism, but we cannot actually do much because we have already done too many.
So since that report I was talking about, Greece signed that landmark agreement with the International Organization for Migration. So how does that impact the flow and the treatment of asylum seekers in your country?
The last agreement that you refer to is the one that is referring to not asylum seekers, but to refugees, so the people who are supposed to get integrated. And that's the latest of our efforts here. So we try to improve what we can offer to people who have been recognized as refugees to Greece in order to avoid all this criticism concerning secondary movements to Europe. And we will try our best. Everyone can easily understand that even the Greek language is not something that can support easily integration. I mean, imagine someone who comes from an African country and speaks fluently French. Most probably he would like to move from Greece to a country that has like the French language as a native language. So he finds a job easier and it's easier to communicate. We all know that it's all Greek to you. It means that Greek is really difficult to be spoken. So in that sense, we have a lot of things that actually are not helping people, but we try our best. We have introduced through International Organization of Migration and the Ministry of Education here programs that refugees can actually learn Greek. It's not an easy job, but still they try, and we try to integrate them on the best possible way. My country is doing the best it can, and we will continue doing the same thing for the years to come. Of course, we need all the support that we can easily get, even from IOM and UNHCR, and we are doing it for the last 10 years, I have to tell you. Back in 2015 or 2016, Greece would never have made it without the support of all the international community and the international organizations. So this thing is not something new to us.
So in terms of the progress that Greece has made and how you're addressing things like delays and in asylum seekers getting cash and that sort of thing, do you think Greece needs more support from the EU and the international community to cope with asylum seekers?
Definitely. Listen, concerning the cash and any other delay, you have to understand that they are contracts, and contracts have a time limit. So whenever a contract ends, there might be a financial issue of the procurement of a new contract and stuff. So there might be some gaps because unfortunately you cannot start off a new contract if another one is running and things like that, which have to do with procurement. So there have been cases in the last 10 years that we had small gaps in procurement. You have to understand that the people that are being supported within camps and get the cash assistance, now they get everything that they need coming from the camp. So they have like the support of the camp to that, like food and the rest. What they are lacking is the cash money for the last 4 years, I think, 4 months, excuse me, for the last 4 months or 5 months. And we are actually moving really fast in order to cover this gap. And they will get all this money that they should have got in the last 4 months, like 300 euro per person, in just one submission of payment. But yes, sometimes we have like 10 or 12 different programs running. It's not only about cash, it's about medical care, translation, cleaning facilities, security facilities. So it's many different contracts. At some point, even procurement fails to keep it without a gap. And that's what we are facing currently. Now, concerning the financial issue that you raised, of course, we will definitely need at any time any financial support because we cannot withstand all this pressure in the extreme needs financially that these people have when they come, logistically I mean. It's the OPEX of this whole operation every year that is huge, and we will definitely need the European support that we got in the past, and we are really positive that we are going to get it from now on. Everyone understands that the countries that are in the borders need the support of the rest of the countries. You know that in the next year and a half, we will have the implementation of the new Asylum and Migration Pact with new rules and new regulations all over Europe. This would actually also impose a need of new financing, extra financing, let's say, because there are new regulations that we have to serve. In that sense, the debate within the European Commission is open, and we are submitting needs, gaps, and whatever is need to be financed in the following years. So I'm really confident that Europe will continue supporting Greece, and I'm really sure that Greece and other member states that act as border states need the support of Europe.
But you mentioned some of those financial constraints and also the complex network, if you like, of all the different contracts and procurement issues that need to be gone through. I wonder, what do you think of the EU's approach to asylum in general? I mean, how could it be improved?
Listen, the first thing that we really need, and we are working on that with the European Commission, is Europe to understand what it takes. I'm looking into this new Asylum and Migration Pact agreement now, and the logistics that are needed for every member state, and even for the other states that are not a border state, I mean, are huge. I don't know whether we can actually comply with all this. So in that sense, we have to go through the whole thing in detail. You know, the devil is in the detail, as we say in Greece and all over the globe. So sometimes we have to look at that devil and find out what it is needed to see whether we are actually doing what we need to do or what we think we need to do. Or what we are doing is not, you know, enough, or if it is that enough that we cannot support it. So these questions have to be risen, and they will be in the following months within Europe, because they just voted for the Asylum Pact a few months ago, and currently we are trying to find out the details. You know, I come from a situation in the past that I was wearing a vest and working in a camp, and there is a big distance between the vest and the tie, as I was saying. So the vest on the ground needs to talk with the tie in bureaucracy and actually come up with a plan on how we need to tackle all these challenges on the ground and what money is involved there.
You also talk about what people think is the problem, and I wonder, is the real problem with refugees the groups of, let's face it, criminals and smugglers who try and bring them overseas and across borders, sometimes taking perilous journeys? What more can be done to target those people?
Listen, this is something that Greece has been rising for a time now, and we say that we cannot actually allow the traffickers, the smugglers, to think that this market will flourish all over Europe, because it is a market. I mean, there are people who are coming here because they have no other thing to do, but there are other people that are coming to Europe because this is a market and they had the opportunity to travel to Europe. So we have to differentiate between those people, and we have to kill the market, if you ask me. So we have to make a pathway of legal migration for those that are in real need, and this legal pathway that will be really cheap and there for many people will actually kill the traffickers, because the traffickers will always face this issue as a market, a profitable market, allow me to say, that would need to flourish. And in that sense, they will always be active in advertising this market and even increasing the demand of customers.
Manos Logothetis, thank you very much.
You can watch every episode of The Agenda in full on CGTN Europe's YouTube channel. And for exclusive extra content from me, my guests and the rest of the team, don't forget to check out The Agenda Show on TikTok.
Coming up on a future agenda, the cost of biodiversity. As COP16 begins in Colombia, where will the money come from to save the planet? But for now, from me, Juliet Mann, and from all the Agenda team here in London, goodbye.